Rabbi Manis Friedman. Hello, thank God it's Tuesday. Chag Sameach. Amazing to spend this time with you today. And of course, the question today is, this is the time of happiness. And we have to be happy. But what happens if it's not so easy to come by? If there's too much worries, too much stress, too much unknown, and how can we just bring this happiness out? How do we channel this happiness? How do we make it happen on demand the way we need to make it happen now? That would be, of course, part one of my question. And Simcha Torah. Simcha Torah is in a couple of days. And even though we've been brave and we've been wise, smart, patient, we know what happened last Simcha Torah. And this is going to be a 3-day holiday where we have to completely give ourselves over, trust, not look at any news, not pay attention to anything external, just to dive into a 3-day of spiritual time and times of happiness and joy and family and all the good stuff. But it's 3 days of not knowing anything, not having control over anything. And how do we go into these 3 days remembering what happened on the last Simcha Torah, which was October 7th last year on the calendar, going in and giving ourselves over, not worrying, not being scared. How do we do this year?
You know, it's as if we could be listening to the radio or to the news would give us some kind of control. We have no control. Staying up on the latest doesn't give you control. Doesn't give you anything actually except nerves, a little anxiety. But it's very appropriate and very interesting that the joy of these days in the olden times, the times of the temple, the Beis Hamikdash, the joy was, interestingly, drawing water which will be used during the holiday for the sacrifices. Now, with every sacrifice in the olden days, there was an offering of wine. Only one time a year, during the 7 days of Sukkot, there was also an offering of water. Water was spilled on the altar together with the sacrifice. That was for those who had sworn off wine. So there was wine, but there was also water. Now, the drawing of that water from a particular well was the occasion of incredible joy, which the sages say, if you weren't there to see how they rejoiced when they drew the water, you have no idea what joy looks like. In other words, it was an indescribable joy. Like the expression, you had to have been there. I cannot describe it for you. If you weren't there, you'll never understand. That's a pretty intense joy. And what was it about? Drawing water. The preparation of wine that was used on the altar didn't occasion such incredible joy, even though wine is supposed to make you happy. So the difference between them, Chassidus teaches, wine has a taste and a color, a bouquet. Water has no taste, no color, no bouquet. Yet water is more essential than wine. So these two liquids represent two functions in the human being. One is the pleasure that comes from knowing. When I understand, when I get a taste of what I believe in or what is good, of course that makes me happy. I do kindness and it tastes good. It feels good. It gives a good vibration. That's wine. Which means it's rational, it fits, it makes sense, it suits me. It appeals to me, it works for me, or whatever expression you want to use. And that's what gives me joy. Water, on the other hand, has no taste, no color, no bouquet. That represents the choosing the right thing and doing the right thing, even though it doesn't necessarily suit me. I don't really understand it. I don't get it. I'm not the type. But if it's the right thing to do, I do it. That's represented by water. In other words, it's the joy of the rightfulness of what I'm doing, not the taste that I get from it. Or in different words, if I do something with my wife that I really enjoy, and it works for her too, great, perfect. But it doesn't compare to doing something that not my thing. If I was alone, I wouldn't do this, ever. But it works for her. And so I do it for her. Now you would expect that if I'm just doing it for her, and I don't really appreciate it, I don't know what makes it so pleasurable, why is it so important, I don't get it, but it works for her, you would think that I would do it mechanically. All right, if this is what you want, fine. So we'll go to your family. But it doesn't have to be that way. Knowing that I'm giving someone else pleasure and making someone else happy can create the greatest pleasure and the greatest joy, greater than the joy I get from doing what makes sense to me and what works for me. Because what works for me is not special. It's just me. And I'm not a surprise to myself. But when I do something for someone else, selflessly, meaning it's not about me. It's really not about me. It's really about her, or it's really about God. If I get beyond myself, then the joy has no limits. Because it doesn't have to suit me, which means it would be tailored to my size, my capacity, my habits. This joy is bigger than me. And that is the joy that comes from humility. Humility meaning, it's not about me. That's water. Water means doing what is necessary, but with enthusiasm. with complete dedication to the rightness of what I'm doing. It is so right. It is so proper. It's so good to someone else. Then the joy is bigger than me because I'm being bigger than me. And that's why the joy of the drawing of the water is much greater than the preparation of the wine. We see it in human experience. If I like wine, I really love wine. I don't, but I'm saying hypothetically. If I liked wine, and wine gave me a lot of happiness and pleasure, it would have to be exactly the kind of wine that I enjoy. If it's slightly different, it ruins the whole experience. If it's not my color wine, if it's not my grape, if it's not my vintage, if it's not my... So it has such limitations. And if it's not well prepared, and if it doesn't come with the right meal and not in the right glass, any little thing can ruin the whole experience. That's not the case with water. When I'm thirsty, water is water. And you say, oh, it doesn't have the particular taste for me. Or I can't drink it from that kind of a goblet. I need it in a wine glass. Water has no such limitations. So when I'm doing for someone else, there are no limitations. You know, if it's slightly different, it's not going to make any difference to me because it's not about me. So, for example, if I don't particularly like flowers, but my wife loves flowers, and she says, bring some flowers. I bring flowers, and it's not the flowers that she likes. I don't care. I'll go out and get the flowers she likes. In other words, I don't put my limitations on her needs or wants or tastes. Whatever she wants. I'm much more flexible, much more inclusive. So that joy, the joy of doing for someone else without any personal interest at all, is infinite. Relative to me, it's infinite. Whatever you say. But if I also liked flowers, we'd have a problem. She asked for flowers, and I brought tulips. She says, I didn't mean tulips. I meant something else. So what was wrong with tulips? Now I'm upset. Why are you being so particular? Tulips are very good. I like tulips. We got problem.
Rabbi Friedman, but does she need to be specific about what she wants? Or do you need to
that would help.
Figure it out on your own?
it would save me a trip to the store again, you know. But that's a different issue. That's a communication thing. But I don't care. Maybe going a second time makes it even more meaningful or whatever. So the point of it is, when I'm not catering to myself counterintuitively, I can be even more joyous and more happy and more pleasurable than when I'm catering to myself. So we have the wrong impression. We're convinced that if I do it my way, then I will enjoy it the most. It's not true. And that's why we're so miserable these days. We're told how to be happy. Oh, constantly. Do what comes natural. Do it your way. Indulge yourself. Do what feels right to you. And we're so miserable. Because it's a lie. It's fake news. The truth is we're much happier and we're much enjoy life much more if life is not about me. That's the water offering. Now, what's even more interesting is the joy was not when they poured the water over the altar. It was when they drew the water which they are going to pour over the altar. Which means it wasn't the mitzvah, it was the preparation for the mitzvah. You would think that the mitzvah would bring greater joy than its preparation. But you see, once you're doing the mitzvah, it has certain limitations. You got to do it right, you got to do it this way, and you have to enjoy the fact that it's a mitzvah. In other words, you have to taste it. So it becomes wine. But the preparation for the water, that's pure water. It's not even a mitzvah that I'm supposed to enjoy. So it's completely the excitement of I'm about to do something that God wants, and I don't get to do it during the year. So it's a special occasion, and that produces a joy that is indescribable. What does it mean, indescribable? Not according to my taste. If it was my taste, I could describe it. It's indescribable because I don't even know what it is. And I don't care. This is not for me, it's not about me, and the joy is infinite. Now, considering what happened a year ago, can we really be happy? Everybody's asking that question. Can we really dance on Simcha Torah as if everything is great? And if we do, is it dishonest? Is it disingenuous? Is it faking? Is it whatever? See, it depends on what we consider the default position. Is life a pleasure? Or is life a struggle? People believe life is a struggle. If you can do something really interesting and really special and really different, you might squeeze a little pleasure out of life. But life, default, misery. It's a challenge, and if you're very smart and very capable and very resourceful, you can find pleasure in this painful existence. So the pleasure is the exception, the unusual. Or you have the opposite understanding. Life is a pleasure. Unfortunately, things happen that interfere with the pleasure. But those things, the negative things, they are the exception. Life, in and of itself, is pleasurable. So you wouldn't allow those interferences, no matter how serious the interference is, you wouldn't allow it to redefine life as if life was not pleasurable. In other words, maintaining the joy of life is the most natural thing. Well, how can you be happy under these circumstances? Life is happy. The question is, should we let a negative, weird, unjustified event ruin the nature of life? Can't do that. This has been the secret of our survival. We have had so many experiences that could have convinced us that life is just in and of itself an unending misery. And if you have a lot of strength and a lot of ingenuity and a lot of imagination, you can kind of make something positive out of desperation, and you can come up with a reason to smile. Barely. But that's not the case. That's not the truth. The truth is life is wonderful. Well, what about all the pain? Yeah, what about it? Where does that come in? Who invited pain into life? To give into it? Never. So even in the most dismal times of our history, and we have had some pretty impressively dismal times, Shabbos came and life was great. Yom Tov came, life was a pleasure. Was it fake? No, that was real. The suffering is fake because it's not justified. It shouldn't be, and it won't be forever. It's an interference, an exception, a very often repeated exception, but it's an exception. So what is the default position? The default position is the positive is real, the negative is an interference and a distraction. Not that it doesn't hurt, of course it hurts. But hurt is not life. Pleasure is life. So no matter how much you hurt, unless you're suicidal, you don't give up on life, and life is pleasure. I have a very interesting example for this. We were talking in a class about Tanya. Tanya introduced a new idea that people had never thought of, and that is that a tzaddik doesn't have an evil inclination, doesn't have a capacity for sin. It's hard to imagine, it's hard to understand. Here's a human being who has no attraction to anything sinful, nothing. So the people in the class said that can't be real. There's no such thing. Every human being can sin. And even the most righteous people in the Torah, you see, they all sinned. They all had their faults. They all had their weaknesses. But Tanya says that a tzaddik does not. So now the question is, what's real? What's true? What's real is that the world that we see, the world that we experience through our senses, once did not exist. In the beginning, there was nothing to see, nothing to hear, nothing to touch, nothing to taste, nothing to smell. There was nothing. Not only was there nothing to see, but there was no seeing. There was no vision. There wasn't even intelligence to know that there is nothing to see. There was literally nothing except Him. Just God Himself. Right? Now, from God, everything that we see and everything that we have in creation comes from Him. It has to come from Him because there was nothing else. Just like everything in the universe has to come from those original subatomic particles, because that's all there was. How does life come from a subatomic particle? I don't know. The mystery of the theory of evolution. But it had to, because there was only subatomic particles. So, of course, there was only God. So everything has to come from him. Now, what makes more sense? If I tell you God created people, comes from him. And there are people who he created who look like him, think like him, feel like him, want the same things he wants. Are you surprised? No, that makes perfect sense. But if I tell you, there are people that come from God, God created them, and they hate God, they don't want to believe in him, they're rebelling against him, that would need a lot of explaining. How did that happen? Like, very simply, if your children look like you don't have to explain anything. If they don't look like you, you got some explaining to do. So that a tzaddik doesn't have an evil inclination is so logical, so consistent. Why would he have an evil inclination? He's created by God. What needs explaining is the non-godly. Where did that come from? How do you start off with nothing but God and end up with godless? So we have an explanation. It's profound, it's deep, it's complex, it's complicated. There was Tzimtzum, God conceals himself, restricts himself. It's brilliant. But it's an explanation, because it needs explaining. The existence of evil needs deep explanations, justification. The existence of goodness needs no explanation. So what is your default position? That life is great or that life is horrible? The fact that life is great doesn't need explanation. But when bad things happen to good people, that needs explaining. A lot of explaining. And even after you finish explaining, it still doesn't make sense. So October 7th makes no sense whatsoever. Why? What's the point? Where is this coming from? Why does it even exist? How can evil exist for people who want to be evil, to be able to be evil? So the question is not just on the people. Evil people engage in evil things. Why do those evil things exist? Where did they come from? From God who chooses life? Comes death? Doesn't make any sense. So, to allow that which is unnatural, inexplicable, unnecessary as far as we know, to allow that to destroy everything good in life? How could you do that? So no, we're going to dance. And the dance is real. And if you remember what happened in the middle of dancing, and it makes you cry, the tears need explaining, not the joy. That's how you fix the world. If you give up on the joy, then October 7th can happen again. If you don't give up on the joy, and you don't allow that, the negativity, the ugliness, the horrors, to destroy life, then there's a future. And the future can be magnificent. So the greater the pain, the more we have to refuse it. Not allow it to become our default position and our opinion of life.
Rabbi Friedman, this is amazing, but it seems that everything is a state of mind, that everything needs to come from our intellect. And unfortunately, if we still look around, it seems like negativity is more of a natural state of the world right now than positivity. So from what I understand, you're saying that we need to change the state of mind in order to change the world. So the question, of course, if I understand you correctly, how do we go about doing that?
Well, that's a very accurate description. The quality of life depends on your attitude. Evil is just an attitude. An attitude we'd rather get rid of than encourage. So yeah, it's all a matter of attitude. And then the question is, which attitude is the true one, the correct one? The problem with how our attitudes are affected or shaped, we all know there is fake news. Fake news. If it's fake, we don't give it any credence. We don't give it any respect. It's fake news. But what if the only thing you ever hear is fake news? In other words, there's a whole lot of fake news. There's the danger that suddenly becomes reality, because there's so much of it. It's everywhere. You see it everywhere. Everyone is lying. Then the lie becomes truth. And that's dangerous. You can't let that happen.
Rabbi Friedman, besides fake news, there's also history that people like to revisit. Well, this happened. And really, when we read about history, it's all negative. It's all about wars. It's all about killing. It's all about terrible, terrible things that have happened to humanity through the ages. So how do we get over history?
But all of that was fake news. Nazism was fake news, which led to a lot of murder, to genocide. But it began with fake news. There's a superior race and there's the inferior race and you have to protect it. That was fake news. My religion is more real or true than your religion, so I have to kill your religion. Fake news. All the disasters come with fake news. And there have been a lot of disasters. But that's just a whole lot of fake. It doesn't become more real through repetition. There's this joke about a guy who says, I'm in business, but I outsell everybody else because I sell not for cost price, for less than cost price. Yes, I don't understand. If you're selling for less than cost price, how do you make a living? He says, volume. I sell so many. If you're selling for less than cost price, volume is not going to help you. It's just going to make it worse.
I don't think it's a joke. I think it's a state of our economy right now. But
the state of our thinking. Yeah.
But that's the whole point. Rabbi Friedman, how does one go about, it all sounds wonderful. Don't be negative, be positive. But it's like, but the question, the normal question would be, how do we do that?
Because instead of looking at what is happening, you got to remember what is supposed to happen. What is life meant to be? Keep your eye on the goal. I just want to share this. One of the incredible events of the last week is that Netanyahu's house was hit by a rocket. There's so much significance in that. First of all, it just so happened that he wasn't home. It just so happens. For the last 17 years, 40,000 rockets have been fired at Israel. It just so happens that no one was home. It just so happens the rocket landed in a highway. It landed in a field. It landed in a... It just so happens 40,000 times in a row. We got so used to it that the newscasters, the news reporters, are just completely comfortable saying a rocket landed and no casualties reported. Next news. You hear what you're saying? No casualties reported. What is a rocket? Why do they shoot rockets? So you can say, well, Hamas, they're not a real army. They're not very well trained, and their rockets are old. They're toy rockets. Okay. Convince yourself that that's true. Convince yourself that they can't shoot straight. So God comes along and says, no. This rocket hit Netanyahu's house. They can shoot straight. But he wasn't home. So if they can shoot straight, then shouldn't you be thanking God that 40,000 rockets never killed a single person? It is so awesomely mind-boggling that all the miracles in the Torah are nothing compared to this. Which miracle in the Torah was so constant and so public, so visible, so obvious? Yes, there was food that fell for 40 years in the desert. That's more impressive than the sea split for a couple of hours. But you get used to it, and all of a sudden you don't even notice the miracle anymore. So I can just imagine if during those 40 years in the desert, some guy goes out in the morning from his tent and there's no food there. I can imagine saying, "Where is my manna?" Where is your manna? You get used to the miracle, and all of a sudden it's mine, and if it doesn't come on time, I'm upset.
Rabbi Friedman, but the human nature is, yes, yeah. 40,000 rockets fell and nobody got hurt, but what if it's going to change? What if that's not going to be the case anymore? The rockets are still coming. What is, how can we be sure?
So part of that concern is, if we don't thank God for the miracles, will that cause the miracles to stop? That's what we should be concerned with. We really need, very seriously, we need to talk up the miracles. We need to be thanking God for the miracles and not be so blinded by the losses that the miracles get lost, unnoticed. The miracles are absolutely... It was in Israel a month ago. I went down to the Kotel. People were, I don't say a typical mood, but there was a group of soldiers at the Kotel. They were singing and they were dancing and they were on a high. And they're going back into service. It's not like they're retired. They are so amazing. They're so amazing. And part of it is they see the miracles. Every one of them will come back and tell you, we just happened to have left a building and just then it blew up. Yeah, well, what about those who walked into a booby-trap building and didn't come out? Okay, so here you have two sides, the positive and the negative, the agony and the ecstasy. Do we forget the ecstasy because there's agony? We have to thank God for the miracles. You don't take miracles for granted. God says, I love you, and you say, yeah, but I'm in a bad mood. No, that's not acceptable. God says, I love you, and you say, well, I don't like that kind of love. That's not acceptable. Love is great. Pain has got to stop. And it will stop. But the love will continue. So I just want to end with this interesting thought. The Suka envelops the whole person. And it's a mitzvah. It is the one mitzvah that hugs you. It surrounds you from four sides. But the halacha, the rule about a sukkah, is that it doesn't have to have four walls. 3 walls are good. 3 walls and a top make a sukkah, which means the hug doesn't have to have 4 sides. A 3-sided hug is sufficient. Why? A hug should be complete. Also, there's an interesting rule concerning the sukkah, is that if you're uncomfortable sleeping in the sukkah or eating in the sukkah, then you're exempt. There's no other mitzvah, well, if you're uncomfortable, then you don't have to do it. There's no such mitzvah other than sukkah. Why is that? So I heard this really incredible explanation. If you're hugging somebody, it can be thoughtful or it can be greedy. You hug somebody because you love them so much, and you indulge yourself by hugging them. Sometimes you hug them a little too long. They're not comfortable. But you're enjoying it. So you keep hugging them after they are already finished. Sometimes you hug them too short. They need a longer hug. But you were busy, there are other people to hug, so you give them a hug and you rush off to another one, and they're left frustrated, particularly children. So psychologically, the rule is when you hug a child, you hug according to the child's need. If he needs a long hug, you give it as long as the kid needs. If he needs just a short one, you make it short. Because if he needs short and you make it long, it's not about him anymore. If he needs long and you make it short, it's not about him anymore. And what is a hug that is not about the person you're hugging? It's abuse. So when it comes to the hug, which is the sukkah, we have these 2 rules. Number 1, it doesn't have to be 4 sides. 3 sides is good. In fact, 2.5 also good. Because sometimes the person doesn't want a bear hug. And God hugs us according to our capacity. When we need a long hug, he gives us a long one. When we need a short one, he gives us a short one. Because that's the nature of love. It's not greedy. It's not according to me. It's only according to you. So Sukkah is a very personal, very subjective expression of God's obsession with us. But in his obsession with us, he doesn't hug us infinitely, because we couldn't handle that. He hugs us according to our capacity. So he says, come into my embrace, which means come into my sukkah. But if it's raining and you're uncomfortable, okay, end of hug. I'm not going to hug you until you're uncomfortable. That's ridiculous. So we have to rejoice, but according to our capacity. If you're not going to be as happy as you would have been if October 7th hadn't happened, or if the war wasn't still going on, so God reminds us. It's interesting how that works. Israel is very, very proud. They got rid of the president of Iran in a mysterious helicopter crash. They got rid of a whole bunch of people when their buzzers, their beepers, suddenly exploded. We got rid of Nasrallah. We got rid of one after the other. And we're starting to think, boy, are we good. So this week, the week of Sukkot, we got rid of Sinwar. How? We didn't even know we did it. It was a total gift from above. God is telling us, don't forget who's running the show. So the rocket landing on Netanyahu's house was God saying, so I'm in charge after all. They are real rockets, and they do know how to shoot. So how come this never happened before? No rocket ever landed on its intended target. Because they're so incapable? No, they're not. You see, they landed right on his house. That's pretty pinpoint perfect. But that was just to get your attention, not to harm anybody. So he wasn't home. And the same thing with Sinwar. We killed Sinwar. You didn't even know it was him. So who killed him? God gave you a gift. So we have to talk it up. We can't be so blind to the miracles, just like a child who feels that his parents are abusive. Maybe. Doesn't mean they don't love you.
Rabbi Friedman, and another miracle is that Hashem, God, gave us you to remind us. We need that voice. We need to keep a clear perspective, which you provide for so many. And it is one of those miracles that people cannot take for granted either.
I think it's so. Look, the Iranians, the bad ones, they know that God is running the show. Like, how could they not? They don't think they're idiots. They don't think that they're the gang that can't shoot straight. They sent 100 rockets. They're not Hamas. They're a real government with a real army. No casualties reported. You think they don't know that God is doing this?
Well, they also try to pick dates in according to Torah, so I'm sure they do know. Everything they're doing is on our holidays.
So they must be really puzzled by the fact that we never say it. We never say God is fighting for us. And they can't understand. Are we up to something? We have some secret... How do Jews not say that God is doing this? To them, it is so obvious. So it kind of encourages them, like, if the Jews are not saying it, then maybe it's not God. If we said it, the war would be over, because they're not going to fight with God. So it is so necessary to state loudly and clearly, not out of religious conviction, but out of current events. God is fighting this war. Check it out. You'll see it.
And therefore, rejoice and feel safe.
And that will end the war. Not ignore it. It will end the war. People who believe in God don't fight God.
Rabbi Friedman, amazing. Thank you so, so much. This has been incredibly enlightening, and it means everything. Thank you so, so much for everything that you're doing for everyone in the world. Thank you for reminding us of the obvious. But we do need that reminder at this point, and we really, really thank you for your time, your wisdom, and what I've learned the most, uncompromising positions. You know the truth, you stick with the truth, you say the truth. I think this is the most valuable lesson that you're teaching the world, besides so many others, but to me, I kind of picked up on that one the most. No compromising. The truth is the truth.
It's something you never regret. You never regret being alive.
Yeah, let's make the best of it.
We got to stay alive.
Yeah.
And alive means focused on the goal, focused on the purpose, and focused on what's going to be there when the dust settles, not focused on that which is going to be gone when the dust settles. So,
thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you very much, Rabbi Friedman. Good Yom Tov. Thank you so, so much.